Late night adventures. Eerie tales from food delivery drivers. In the dead of night, when the city has fallen into deep slumber, food delivery drivers face challenges no one could foresee. Silent roads, remote houses, and peculiar addresses all hide eerie secrets. This is no ordinary job. Each delivery could turn into an adventure into the world of darkness, where unimaginable horrors lurk in the shadows. Join me as we explore 8 true stories where food deliveries became confrontations with the inexplicable, mysterious events that only those who experience them can truly understand. Do you dare follow them to the very end? Story 1. The Rainy Night Delivery. The night of October 12, 2019. Around 11:45 p.m., a secluded house on a hill in the outskirts of Portland, Oregon. Marcus, 26 years old, worked part-time as a food delivery driver to save money for his upcoming wedding. It was a stormy night. The streets were desolate, and the streetlights flickered dimly. Marcus received a late-night order from a small pizza restaurant. The delivery address was to a house far from the city center, near the forest outside Portland. From the moment Marcus accepted the order, he felt uneasy. The address wasn't detailed on the map, only showing a dirt road leading up a hill. It seems like an old house, he thought, trying to shake off his anxiety. As he approached the location, his car's headlights illuminated a rusty iron gate. Above it hung an old sign that read Blackwood Manor. The rain poured harder, and Marcus decided to park in front of the gate and walk in. He grabbed the pizza box, passed through the gate, and began walking along a narrow stone path. The house appeared in the darkness, large and ominous, with windows seemingly covered by thick curtains. The surrounding trees swayed in the wind, creating eerie whistling sounds. Marcus knocked on the door 3 times, but no one answered. Suddenly, a raspy voice called out from inside, "Leave the food by the door." Marcus froze. The voice came abruptly, as if it was right beside him, though no one had opened the door. They must have an intercom system, he thought. Trying to stay calm, he placed the pizza box down, turned around, and began walking back. But as he stepped off the porch, a cold shiver ran down his spine. Turning back, Marcus noticed the front door slightly ajar, with faint light spilling out from inside. Trying to steady his nerves, Marcus called out, "Hello, I've left the food here." There was no response. Instead, he heard soft, uneven footsteps coming from inside, as if someone was dragging their feet. Marcus took a few steps back, his heart pounding. Suddenly, a shadow appeared in the dim light from the living room. It was a frail woman with long, disheveled hair, dressed in a tattered white gown. Her face was hidden in the shadows, but Marcus could feel her eyes fixed on him. "Have you seen anyone else besides me?" she whispered, her voice faint but oddly resonant. Marcus, trembling, didn't know how to respond. He simply shook his head, trying to turn away. But as he reached the gate, a piercing scream echoed from behind, a woman's scream. Marcus jumped into his car, started the engine, and sped away, leaving the eerie house behind. When he reached the city center, he called his company to report the incident. What terrified him even more was the manager's response. "Are you sure? That address was removed from our system 2 years ago. The homeowner died in a fire." Marcus was stunned. Checking his delivery app, he saw that the order had vanished, as if it had never existed. Since that night, Marcus never accepted deliveries to remote areas again, but he admitted that sometimes, in his nightmares, he still hears the blood-curdling scream of that woman. Story 2. The Call from Apartment 302. March 5th, 2021, 10:30 p.m. An old apartment building in Little Havana, Miami, Florida. Emma, 24 years old, worked part-time as a food delivery driver after her university classes. That night, she received an order from a small Mexican restaurant, destined for apartment 302 in an old, decrepit building. When she arrived, the building appeared cold and desolate. Most apartments were unlit, giving the impression that the place had been abandoned long ago. Emma entered the lobby and noticed that the elevator wasn't working. Sighing, she grabbed the food bag and started climbing the stairs to the 3rd floor. The hallway was pitch dark, lit only by a few flickering bulbs. She felt uneasy but tried to reassure herself. On the third floor, Emma stood in front of apartment 302. She knocked on the door, but there was no response. After a few seconds, she heard soft footsteps from inside, followed by a raspy voice. "Leave the food by the door." Emma complied, placing the bag down and turning to leave. But after taking a few steps, she heard the door creak open. Turning back, she saw a bony, wrinkled hand pull the food bag inside. The door slammed shut abruptly, startling her. Minutes after leaving the building, Emma received a call from the customer's number. She answered, and a weak voice asked, "Did you see anyone else by the door?" Emma was puzzled. "No, just me." "Why?" The line was silent for a moment before the person spoke softly. "I didn't order any food." Emma froze. "But your name is Michael, right? I delivered to your address." The voice replied, panic-stricken, "Michael was my brother's name. He died 3 months ago." Emma couldn't believe her ears. Looking into her rearview mirror, she saw a figure of a man standing on the balcony of apartment 302, staring directly at her. His face was pale and waxy. Emma screamed and sped away. After reporting the incident to the police, they informed her that apartment 302 had been vacant for a long time. The previous tenant, Michael, had died after falling from the balcony. Emma never returned to that building. Story 3. The Tunnel of No Return. July 18th, 2020, around 1 a.m. Blue Hollow Tunnel. On the outskirts of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Lucas, an experienced food delivery driver, often accepted orders in quiet suburbs to avoid competition. That night, he received a strange order from a small downtown restaurant. The delivery address led him to Blue Hollow Tunnel, a place he had never heard of. The road to Blue Hollow was desolate and eerie, with no streetlights. As Lucas drove deeper along the pothole-ridden path, his GPS signal began to waver. An unsettling feeling crept in as he saw the tunnel's entrance, a stone archway, overgrown with moss and vines. Above it was a rusted sign that read, "Blue Hollow, do not enter." Lucas stopped his car to double-check the delivery address on the receipt. "I must have got it wrong," he muttered to himself. But no, the address was correct. Suddenly, a message from the customer appeared on his phone. "Delivered to the end of the tunnel. I'm waiting." Taking a deep breath, Lucas switched on his high beams and cautiously drove into the tunnel. His headlights illuminated the damp stone walls, revealing cracks and patches of mold. A chilling draft swept through the tunnel, making the hair on his neck stand on end. Midway through, his headlights caught the silhouette of a person standing still. It was a tall man in a long black coat, his face obscured by a hood. His pale, bony hands hung loosely at his sides. Lucas lowered his window slightly. "Here's your food. That'll be $25, he called out, trying to maintain a steady voice. The man didn't respond. He stepped closer, his movements slow and deliberate. He took the bag of food, but didn't offer payment. Instead, he stared directly at Lucas. Though his face remained hidden, Lucas felt the weight of an unblinking gaze penetrating him. "Do you have money? I need to collect payment." Lucas insisted. The man whispered, his voice hoarse and barely audible. "Leave before they come." Lucas froze. "Who's coming?" he asked, his voice trembling. But the man didn't answer. He turned and disappeared into the darkness at the tunnel's end. Feeling a rising sense of dread, Lucas decided to leave immediately. He reversed his car, but before he could turn around, a cacophony of footsteps echoed from the far end of the tunnel. It wasn't one or two pairs of feet. It sounded like dozens. Running erratically, Lucas flicked his headlights toward the noise and saw them. A horde of figures. They were dressed in tattered clothing, their faces distorted and their eyes glowing like wild animals. They were sprinting toward him, their movements jerky and unnatural. "Damn it!" Lucas yelled, slamming his foot on the gas. The car sped forward, but one of the figures leapt onto the hood, pounding the windshield with inhuman strength. The glass cracked under the assault. Lucas swerved violently, throwing the figure off. Another figure appeared at the passenger window, its grotesque face pressed against the glass. Grinning maniacally, its bloodshot eyes glared as its mouth moved, mouthing unintelligible words. Stay with us." In blind panic, Lucas veered sharply, scraping the side of the tunnel wall. The creature fell away, leaving smears of dirt and grime on the window. Finally, Lucas saw the faint glow of the tunnel's exit. He floored the gas, the engine roaring as he escaped the horrors behind him. He didn't stop driving until he was miles away, his chest heaving with each breath. When he looked in his rearview mirror, the tunnel entrance appeared dark and silent, as if nothing had happened. But the claw marks and smeared handprints on his car told a different story. After reporting the incident to the police, they found no evidence of anyone in the tunnel. However, locals mentioned that Blue Hollow had a grim past. Years ago, it was home to a group of homeless people who perished in a fire. Some say their restless spirits still haunt the tunnel, luring the unsuspecting into their domain. Lucas quit his job shortly after that night. Yet, he still wakes up drenched in sweat, haunted by the glowing eyes and chilling whispers from the tunnel. Story 4. The Last Order at the Abandoned Apartment. Halloween night, October 31st, 2018. Around 11:45 p.m. Eldridge Manor Apartments, outskirts of New Orleans, Louisiana. Mike, a young food delivery driver, often worked during holidays for the generous tips. On Halloween night, he received an order from a regular customer who requested food from a famous Italian restaurant. The delivery address was to an apartment complex in the suburbs, a place Mike had never visited before. The road to Eldridge Manor was dimly lit, with only the moonlight filtering through the trees. When Mike arrived, the building loomed in darkness. Not a single light was on, and the atmosphere was oppressive. Maybe they're hosting a Halloween party, Mike thought, trying to calm his nerves. He grabbed the food bag and approached the entrance. The main door creaked as he pushed it open. Inside, the hallway was long and narrow, illuminated only by the flashlight on his phone. Dusty drapes covered the windows, and the air reeked of mildew. A message from the customer pinged on his phone. 5th floor. Apartment 503. I'm waiting. The elevator was out of order, forcing Mike to climb the stairs. Each step echoed in the eerie silence. Occasionally, he thought he heard faint footsteps behind him, but when he turned around, no one was there. When he reached the 3rd floor, he paused to catch his breath. On the wall, scrawled in red paint, were the words, "Don't turn back. Don't look at them." Feeling increasingly uneasy, Mike hurried up the stairs. At apartment 503, the door was ajar, and a dim light flickered from within. "Hello? I've got your food," he called out. There was no reply. Mike stepped inside and set the bag on a table in the empty room. But as he turned to leave, a chilling voice whispered, "Thank you for coming. Don't leave just yet. They want to meet you." Mike spun around, his heart racing. The room was empty, but the door suddenly slammed shut. Laughter erupted from the shadows, soft at first, then louder and more menacing. The walls were covered with old black and white photos of the building's former residents. Each face had been crossed out with red ink. "Who's there?" Mike shouted, frantically trying to open the door. A shadowy figure emerged, a tall man in a tattered suit, his pale face expressionless and his eyes white as marble. He extended a hand toward Mike, whispering, "Don't be afraid. Stay with us. This place needs you." Story 5. The Haunted Mansion Order. 2:30 a.m. August 15th, 2021. Thornhill Mansion, a remote rural area in Maine. Amelia, a part-time food delivery driver, received an anonymous order. The address led her to an old mansion deep in the woods, far removed from any residential area. Despite feeling uneasy, she accepted the order due to the promise of a $100 tip. The road to Thornhill Mansion was rugged, flanked by dense, overgrown trees. A thick fog rolled in, and the headlights barely illuminated the narrow dirt path. As Amelia approached, her GPS lost signal, leaving her with an ominous sense of isolation. When the mansion came into view, It resembled something out of a nightmare. The structure was decrepit, with crumbling stone walls covered in moss and shattered windows. The massive wooden door bore deep scratches, as if clawed by some wild beast. Amelia parked her car, grabbed the food, and hesitated before knocking. After a moment, the door creaked open, revealing an elderly woman dressed in black. Her face was deathly pale, and her hollow eyes didn't blink. "You've arrived," the woman said in a breathy voice. "Please, come in." Amelia hesitated. "I'm just here to deliver the food." "Here it is." The woman didn't take the bag. Instead, she gestured toward the dim interior. "Bring it to the dining room. They're waiting for you." Stepping across the threshold, Amelia was immediately struck by the mansion's unnatural coldness. The faint glow of candles lit the long hallway, casting flickering shadows on the walls. Portraits of stern-faced ancestors seemed to watch her every move. In the dining room, a long wooden table stood bare, save for a single chair at its head. Amelia set the food down and turned to leave, but the door slammed shut behind her. "Hello? I've delivered the food," she called out, her voice trembling. The only response was a faint rustling, followed by the reflection of a figure in the grand mirror above the fireplace. Amelia saw herself, but behind her stood a man with a distorted face, his hollow eyes burning into hers. She spun around, but no one was there. When she looked back at the mirror, the figure was closer, its skeletal hand reaching for her shoulder. Panicking, Amelia bolted for the door. It wouldn't budge. The sound of slow, heavy footsteps descended from the upper floor, followed by a guttural growl. Suddenly, the elderly woman's voice boomed from upstairs. "You can't leave. You belong here now." In a desperate search for an exit, Amelia smashed a nearby window and squeezed through, cutting her arms and legs in the process. She tumbled into the overgrown bushes outside and sprinted back to her car. As she drove away, Amelia glanced in her rearview mirror. The woman stood in the mansion's doorway, her lips curled into a sinister smile. After reporting the incident to the police, they found a mansion abandoned for over 50 years. Local legends spoke of a family that was brutally murdered there, their spirits forever tied to the property. Story 6. The Order from the Abandoned Motel. 12:15 a.m., April 22nd, 2020. Blackwood Motel, an abandoned motel on Highway 74, near the North Carolina border. Jason, an experienced food delivery driver, knew that late-night orders often came with high tips. However, that night, when he received an order from an abandoned motel on Highway 74, he felt a sense of doubt. The Blackwood Motel had been closed for many years after a strange case involving the disappearance of several tourists. The drive to the Blackwood Motel was eerily quiet. The road was deserted, with no cars in sight, and only the sound of Jason's engine filled the thick air. He saw the motel in the distance, like a ghost in the darkness, with the faint glow of the car's dashboard light as the only source of illumination. When Jason arrived, the old motel stood still, its windows shattered, and the front door locked. However, a strange note was stuck to the door. "Don't enter if you don't want to know the truth." Despite the warning, Jason ignored it and entered. The door opened smoothly, almost as if welcoming him. Inside, the atmosphere was cold and still. Darkness enveloped the space, with only the weak light from flickering broken lamps casting dim shadows on the dusty walls. Jason looked around and saw an old sign hanging on the wall, bearing the name of the motel. He realized that this had once been a popular stop for travelers, but now it lay in ruins. Jason moved into a room where he found a middle-aged man sitting in an armchair, his hair disheveled and his eyes as deep and black as a pit. The man stood up when he saw Jason, offering a cold smile and taking the food bag without saying a word. "Thank you. Please, sit for a moment," the man said, his voice soft but strange. Jason felt the air around him growing heavier, but he did not dare refuse. He sat in the chair across from the man, watching him, but soon, everything around him began to change. The weak light from the lamp flickered, and strange noises echoed from within the building. Moments later, Jason realized the man was no longer standing before him. He had vanished, and the room grew silent in a terrifying way. Jason stood up, his unease growing with each passing second. He looked around the room, and suddenly, the flickering light stopped, revealing the faint figure of a woman in a white dress, her long hair flowing, standing in the doorway. Her face was nothing but a mass of bruises, her bloodshot eyes staring directly at Jason. "You can't leave," the woman whispered. Jason ran outside, but the door slammed shut right in front of him. He turned to look back at the motel, feeling as if something was chasing him from behind. The ghosts of the missing tourists seemed to be coming back to kill him. Chaos broke out as Jason fled the motel. He heard footsteps thundering and the screams of invisible figures chasing after him. He dashed toward his car, not daring to look back. When he got into the car, he glanced in the rearview mirror and saw faint figures standing at the motel's windows. Staring at him, Jason sped away at top speed, not daring to stop until he reached the city. He knew he had survived, but those ghosts would always haunt him in his nightmares. Later, Jason researched the Blackwood Motel and discovered that it had been abandoned after the mysterious disappearance of 5 tourists. According to survivors, they had been lured into the motel, and after meeting the strange man, they were never seen again. That man, it turned out, was a predator who had died in a massacre before turning into a ghost that haunted the place. Story 7. The Order from the Old Cemetery 3:00 a.m. December 5th, 2019.st. John's Cemetery. The outskirts of Boston, Massachusetts. Chloe, a new food delivery driver, received an order at 3 a.m. from an address located next to Street John's Cemetery, a place known for its eerie ghost stories. Thinking it was a prank, Chloe accepted the order since the customer had already paid in advance. When she arrived at the cemetery, Chloe felt something was off. Despite it being 3 a.m., the surroundings were eerily quiet, but there was a chilling sense, as if someone was watching her. She saw a small house right by the cemetery gates. The gravestones around her seemed like ghosts, their eyes fixed on her slender frame. Chloe knocked on the small house door. The door opened strangely, with no one inside. She stepped in and saw a man sitting at the dining table, his face pale, his eyes deep-set. He said, "Thank you for coming. Please, sit with me for a moment." Chloe tried to decline, but the man insisted. As Chloe sat down, the darkness in the room grew thicker, and she felt as if everything around her was spinning. Suddenly, the ghosts of the long dead appeared, standing around her, slowly moving closer. Their voices whispered terrifyingly about their deaths. Chloe panicked and ran out of the house, dashing through the cemetery gates. As soon as she ran outside, Chloe looked back and saw the man and the ghosts staring at her from inside the house. When she looked into their eyes, she realized they were all long-dead souls. These spirits were waiting for new victims to take their place. Chloe ran as fast as she had ever run, and when she glanced back through the rearview mirror, the house had completely vanished. The souls continued to chase her, never letting go. Story 8. The Order from the Old Prison 2:30 a.m. July 3rd, 2018. Old Westfield Prison, outside Sacramento, California. Toby, a delivery driver with 3 years of experience, was used to late-night orders. However, when he received an order from a strange location, a rough building near the old Westfield Prison, he felt something was wrong. The prison had been closed over 40 years ago after a series of violent incidents among prisoners, and many ghost stories had circulated about the place. Toby drove down the quiet road, the headlights illuminating the prison's gray stone walls. The area appeared to have been abandoned for decades, with no one around but the dark shadows of trees swaying in the wind. When he arrived, he saw an old car parked in front of the prison gates. There was no one around, but it felt as if someone was watching him. Toby stopped his car and entered the old building. The rusted iron gates opened quietly. With no sound, he stepped into the prison yard. Ahead, he saw a figure standing and staring at him, a tall man dressed in black and white prison stripes. The man simply pointed to an old table in the corner of a dark room. Place the food on that table and leave, the man said in a cold, emotionless voice. Toby complied, placing the food bag on the table and quickly turning to leave. But just before he could, a window above the prison opened, and a cold gust of wind blew in, carrying a sigh as if many people were standing inside. Toby quickly returned to his car and drove off. But suddenly, the car stopped and wouldn't move. He looked in the rearview mirror and saw strange figures appearing in the prison windows, the ghosts of deceased prisoners, their eyes glowing in the dark. One of them, a tall man, waved at Toby from afar. Unable to take it anymore, he floored the accelerator, feeling like he was being watched the entire way. Toby never returned to that old prison, but the haunting souls followed him for a long time, tormenting him in dreams and late-night hours. These stories have unveiled some of the darkness that food delivery drivers face every day. While these strange and supernatural events may frighten us, behind every delivery is a real story, where people come face to face with the inexplicable. Have you ever wondered if you might be the next to encounter such horrors? If so, would you dare to deliver food on a quiet, late night? Let these stories haunt you. And remember, in Zadok, anything can happen. Stay tuned for more intriguing and mysterious tales. And if you dare face your fear, don't forget to follow so you won't miss any secrets. Goodbye for now, and see you in the next video.